I'm Scott Lister, and sometimes I make films. Sometimes I do it for fun, and sometimes I do it because it's my job. What got me into filmmaking would have been when I was about 5 years old, and I really loved dinosaurs. And my dad said, "Oh, you like dinosaurs, huh? Well, let me tell you about the biggest and most awesome dinosaur, Godzilla." And he wasn't a fan. He must have just seen that it was on TV. And he taped it for me, and I watched it, and to my eyes, Godzilla was completely realistic. And he must have said to me, no, Godzilla's a guy in a suit. I guess to assuage my fears. And so I thought, oh, okay. And I started looking at it like, all right, well, when you see all of him, that must be a guy in a suit. And then it goes in close, and you see like the lips curling and the eyes moving, and I reasoned that it was a puppet. It was an animatronic, but I didn't know what that was when I was 5. And then they're doing this with blue screen, and this is an editing trick, and it just got me interested and curious in the technicalities of filmmaking. And from there, it was just like, I want to do this. And I must have bugged my parents for years to get me a camcorder, and they wouldn't, because they probably thought I was an irresponsible child and it was a phase I would grow out of. But eventually they rented one. And I made my first movie with my toys. And I did the nuclear apocalypse of New York City I had little cardboard buildings, and I had little toy tanks with that you pulled back and they go and rolled into frame like that for the battalion of tanks coming in. And the nuclear bomb dropping, I had a super soaker, a water pistol, the bit that you unscrew and fill up, and it sort of looked, I reasoned it looked like a bomb. So I dropped that into frame, and then I cut to a close-up of my white wall and me going behind the camera. And so from then, there was no media in my high school, so I just made a zombie movie with my friends, and I showed the trailer for that to get into actually studying film. At Swinburne TAFE, and then went from TAFE into uni and graduated. And these days, I guess I'm lucky enough to be behind a camera or in an edit suite for money. So that's how it all started. The first film I ever made was the one I mentioned, a feature shot on mini DV that I did in high school. That was a zombie movie. It was called Zombie X because of all the Italian zombie films that were all retitled Zombie 2, 3, 4, whatever. And I was like, this encompasses all of them, so this is just Zombie X. And I made it on Wednesdays. If we didn't do sport as an elective, we could go home at lunchtime. So I was like, hey, everybody, let's go to the park, or let's go to my place or whatever, and we'll film a zombie movie. And we had butcher's entrails and fake blood everywhere, and I played 3 different characters, sort of I guess like Mike Myers. And it was an hour and a half long feature in the end. I think there was a 2-hour cut of it at one point, which was really, really unnecessary. But it taught me a lot. And like I said, I cut a trailer out of that, and I showed that in my interview for Swinburne TAFE. And it's terrible. It's one of the worst films you could ever possibly sit through, but they're beautiful memories, and I still love it a lot. 3 filmmakers that inspire me would be... There are a lot of directors I love for their artistry, like Argento or Kurosawa or Leone or whatever, but in terms of the way I approach films, or hope to approach films, one of them would have to be Antonio Margheriti, because... if you don't know who he is an Italian genre filmmaker. And I first saw Alien from the Deep when I was about 6 years old, taped off Channel 10. And that's probably one of his worst movies. But he was a master of, with very little, he'd make something that looked incredibly stylish and much, much bigger than it should have done. Whereas another lower tier director would have given been given his kind of budget and probably produced crap. He surrounded himself with very dependable people, and he was a master of doing things with a minimum of takes. And there's one that I love in particular that has a car chase in the desert, and it's done with miniatures. And like it goes, like the car goes off a cliff and over an oil tanker, and it explodes as the car hits the ground, and they cut into like people in a real car going like, as like it goes off the ramp, and it's like it's clearly a model, but it's done so stylishly and so like with such energy. You're like, yeah, I'm on board for this. So like that's something that I'd love to try to capture in my own movies. So Nam Lai Choi would be another one. He's in the same sort of ballpark as Antonio Margheriti. He did Story of Ricky and Seventh Curse and Erotic Ghost Story. If you don't know who he is, that played on SBS probably about 20 times. But he crams 2 hours worth of movie into about 80 minutes. And again, it's cheap but stylish sort of a deal. But rather than Margheriti made things seem very, very big, bigger than they were, and very stylish, whereas Nam Lai Choi is just like, yeah, you know what? Like, this is going a million places and you feel like you've just done drugs. Well, this movie doesn't give a fuck. And again, that's a sensibility that I would love to put into my films. Third, Roger Corman. As a director, pedestrian, he's fine. But as a producer, that man was unstoppable. He was so resourceful and so like up to 11 in his thinking of how can we get the absolute most out of everything. My favorite story of his is when he was doing, I think it was The Raven with Boris Karloff, and they had Boris Karloff and a castle. And they shot the movie for like 2 weeks. And then as they were nearing the end of the production, he thought, okay, well, actually, like we've come in under time. And he said to his scriptwriter, write me another script with Boris Karloff and a haunted castle. And we'll like use the sets again and we'll get a second film out. And they broke for like 2 weeks or something and got another film through. So again, all those, I guess the theme is they made a lot out of a little and were very clever about it and were very resourceful about it. So that's kind of what inspires me. Some films that inspire me. One of them, I'm not such a big overall fan of the director in his subsequent works, but Versus, year 2000, Japanese movie by Ryuhei Kitamura. Indie movie shot for almost nothing. Stars a bunch of people that he knew or that he thought would look good on camera, set all in one location in a forest. Very little anything. But it is one of the most exciting films I've ever seen in my life that at the end, when it concluded, I felt like I'd stepped off a roller coaster. And it's one of the only movies I've ever watched for the first time and then just immediately watched again. And it goes back in time, it goes into the future, it goes into another dimension, they fight zombies, like it's all, the action is amazing, and it looks so stylish. And then you hear stories like, oh, well, we could only afford to hire the Steadicam for 1 day and stuff like that. That's like, that inspires me amazingly if I could make something just a little bit like that. Another film, John Carpenter's The Thing, which is an obvious choice. It's one of my favorite movies, but what I particularly love about it, or one thing I particularly love about it, was I heard a story from someone who worked on the film who was quite close to him, that basically they shot most of it and then had to break because of a strike or something in the studio. And basically he had about a month or 2 of downtime, and he looked at a work print of what he'd shot so far and just realized, okay, this film doesn't work. And I'm sure there was a better film in it than what he was seeing. But basically, he sat down and just brainstormed for the month that he had and pivoted massively. He like reshot death scenes and he restructured parts of the film and he cut huge swathes of it. And yeah, basically remade it into an amazing and wonderful and subtle piece of psychological tension, which, yeah, obviously wasn't loved in its time, but now is considered one of the best horror movies ever made. And I just think that story of him pivoting like that is incredible. That inspires me a lot. What is my favorite film that I've made so far? That's like asking a mother, like, which kid is her favorite. Like, they're all so different and they're all like such different, wonderful memories. Like Zombie X is the only feature I've ever shot on mini DV. that I ADR'd the whole thing. And, you know, my recent shorts are like the only ones I've done in 4K in CinemaScope. And, you know, they're all like really different. So I don't think I could pick one favorite. There are a few that I love. The tap is, you know, giving me, I don't know, positive vibes at the moment, but that's probably because it's the most recent thing that I've done. And as the cycle goes, I'll make something else, and then I'll be like, okay, everything before it was, you know, that's when you're your own worst critic. You make things that, okay, I'm gonna make something good this time, and then finally it's you make it, and for 5 minutes you're like, yeah, okay, that was pretty good. Okay, no, now I'm gonna make something actually good. What is the vision I bring into my work? I don't know. I just try to make movies that I would enjoy if I was someone else and I were discovering them for the first time. I don't really think, you know, this is going to, you know, communicate my message to the people, or, you know, this is going to define me or anything like that. My benchmark for everything I make is just, would I like this if I wasn't inclined to, if I was someone else?
And all times, no one can withstand the power of the Daleks!
My name is Alexis. I was built on Mechanus hundreds of years ago. I don't know why I'm here or what I was made for. Maybe this is how I find out.
Right now, apart from things I'm doing for other people, I'm DOPing a feature, How Deep is the Ocean, which is fun. And a few other little things. For myself, I'm making a short film at the moment called Snaggletooth, which is a giant monster movie inspired by Godzilla. And we've done it with like a guy in a suit, and everything's as in camera as I can possibly get it. Little models, little toy tanks and spaceships and things like that. And we've been slowed down for obvious reasons because everybody's locked down at the moment. There's just one more little scene I need to shoot. But beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. I'd like to do a feature in the future, but it's uncertain. The future is unwritten. The biggest challenge that faces the Australian film industry right now. Do you mean outside of the fact that we're all locked down in a pandemic? If we were to rewind back 6 months, I would say the Australian film industry as a whole, I was going to say it lacks identity, but I don't think that's true, because I was talking to somebody from Canada and they were saying, no, I feel like as Canadians we don't have an identity because we just sort of make things for America largely. Whereas when it's an Australian film, you know it's an Australian film because they make a huge deal about it. But I don't know, I feel like that's a double-edged sword. I don't think we're good at making genre films. Of course, I would say that, but I really don't think we are. A lot of Australian films tend to be bleak dramas that end unhappily for all involved. And I think audiences are a little tired of that. And I can't think of... I mean, they try occasionally with like stuff like Brand New Day and stuff like that. But, okay, no spoilers, but actually even that was quite unhappy. I can't think of the last time an Australian film was just a wholly good, fun time to go to the cinemas. And I can't think certainly of the last time that anybody thought, hey, you know, tell all your friends you got to see this, in the way that like people get excited about like a Marvel movie or something like that. Not that I think that's what we should make. I mean, The Castle maybe, I don't know. So I think there's that broadly. But on a lower boots on the ground sort of a level, I think our industry is so small, despite Australia's, I don't know, sort of social current of mateship. I think it's so small here and there are so few opportunities that it's very cutthroat. And when a job comes up or an opportunity comes up, it's like seagulls at the beach on a chip, rather than you go to bigger places like London or Canada or wherever, where there's a bigger and more healthy industry and people are chill. There's still a lot of ego, but people are more chill and just like, hey, let's help each other out. Yeah, whereas here it's much more cutthroat. And it would be nice if people could chill out, but at the same time, I think, again, going back to the first problem, there's a current of the industry having the shit rise to the top somewhat. Like Saw, they pitched that around to everybody they could think of in Australia, and everybody turned them down. So once they got it actually made in America, suddenly everybody's like, oh wow, Saw's Australian. Well, what did you ever do to help them, And likewise with like the Babadook, like Dave Stratton and everybody, they all thought, oh, this is like a laughable piece of nonsense. And then the director of The Exorcist says, oh, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life. And suddenly Australia's like, yeah, the little Aussie battler is like doing well. And it's like, well, no, where were you when like we needed help? You know what I mean? So I know I sound bitter, but that's only because I am. The biggest challenge that I've faced in filmmaking would probably be getting people on board with the way I make films. Not in terms of its actual production, because generally that's fine and I make films, just fine usually. But I don't make festival films. I'll put that lightly. I make weird genre stuff that is lit all colorful, like an Argento film, or is like has weird narrative twists and turns. And I'm not trying to play myself up as well. I'm an out of the box sort of genius or anything like that. I don't think that. It's just I'm very aware that what I make is very non-commercial. A friend of mine said, "You are fiercely non-commercial," and so I suppose just trying to elevate what I do to a point where people can look at it objectively and say, okay, this is against the grain, but I can see why it's neat. Maybe that's, I guess, been my goal for a little while. I feel like I'm slowly crawling there. Because in my, this is rewinding like 10 years, but in my earliest films, I didn't have the know-how that only comes from experience to sort of make things that looked inherently, sort of neat on its own. My early films, I feel like people would go, okay, well, that's a puppet, and it's sort of not shot very well, and it looks a bit dumb. Whereas I'm trying to get to a point where, okay, well, that's a puppet, but like that's really stylish, and that looks cool, and it's a neat puppet, and it's look at the way it's lit, that's neat, that's what I want, and that's been hard. Advice I would give to upcoming filmmakers, and I include myself under that umbrella, be true to your voice. Don't let people tell you that what you're doing isn't commercial, what you're doing isn't cool, what you're doing isn't going to sell. Follow your own truth, follow your own heart. And if you want to make something that's completely bonkers, do it. Do it and stick with it and work out how to do it so well that they have to listen. Don't let people bully you into being, no, you're doing it wrong. No, this is the way you do it. This is how it's supposed to be done. There's no supposed to be anything in art, So stick to your heart. That's what I'd say. That's what I'm trying to do. My process for choosing actors is generally I don't cast people blind. Usually I like to use people that I've worked with before and that I can tell I'm going to have a good rapport with. And again, this is like the Antonio Margheriti sort of a model. But if I talk to an actor, let's say, on set, or maybe even like they're doing a play or something, I've poached a lot of theatre actors before, and I say to them, number one, I get along with them well. That is the important first step. But then if I say to them, so what kind of stuff do you do? And they say, oh, I've done like 100 dramas. And I say, well, what's something that like you haven't done yet but you would like to do? And if they start saying, oh, well, I'd love to do action, or I'd love to do, you know, something sci-fi, or I'd love to be a James Bond villain or something, then, you know, the little box is ticked in my head and I think, okay, you know, remember this name because maybe they're worth auditioning in the future. Do I believe in giving unknown actors a chance? Yeah, absolutely. I have very little interest in casting known name actors. We nearly, who was it? Jeffrey Rush said no outright to this short I did with a friend of mine to narrate it. And then Guy Pearce was like, maybe if I like the script, and then we never heard from him again. And then later, my friend bumped into him at some after party, and I said, you should have harassed him about it. So in my limited experience, you know, it's been very difficult. I love casting unknowns. I think the right look and the right talent and the right ability is way more important than a name. But I know a lot of producers feel differently. And I get that. That makes sense. But maybe, you know, my issue as a director is that I look at these things as a zeitgeist of art and of what I want to say, and, you know, there's got to be someone else saying, no, you need to look at this commercially. But yeah, I love casting unknowns. An actor that I would love to work with, a mainstream actor, if I could travel back in time, I'd love to work with people like Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing or old horror stars like that. But in terms of right now, Kurt Russell is always good. I've heard him described as Hollywood's secret weapon before, and I don't know why, but that description puts a smile on my face. Anne Hathaway would be really good. She's very talented and also very spunky and capable of doing action and capable of being quirky, and she has a lot to her. Colossal. She was good in that. So I'd love to do something like that with her. And getting really specific, I don't know her name, but I'd love to work with the little girl actress from Train to Busan, because the ending scene, she's a genius. So yeah, I don't often spend a lot of time thinking, oh, I'd love to work with this famous Hollywood actor. I kind of figure, like, you know, by the time I get there, they might all be like retired or dead anyway. So, but Fantasyland, yeah. Look, I'm just trying to find out as much as I can about Professor Dimbago and his theories on time.
You can open a door with Dimbago's machine, and maybe God will be on the other side of it.
And that's what this theory says, that the planet goes on in an infinite loop. The dinosaurs, mankind, each time a little bit different, and each turnover confined to its own field of time so that they're inaccessible from one another. Theoretically.
Okay, I got it.
What?
And if it came out after you caused your temporal anomaly, you must have woken it up somehow.
Third time I found a burlesque dancer like this. Yeah.
What if everything that comes through the hole that we made is a representative of a different dominant species from each timeline? Last time it was dinosaurs, this time it's plant life. I aiming for my career to stay here or go overseas? I was this far away from moving to London this year, if the pandemic hadn't happened, if that tells you anything. But at the moment, I'm still in two minds, because I feel like there's still, I'm very comfy here, and I know a lot of people here, and I have people that I know I can depend on or can get help from, or who I can help. So I like the network I've built up here. And I'm all for going somewhere else and starting over, but I feel like, I haven't quite exhausted Melbourne yet in terms of what I want out of it. So one day, the future's unknown. Do I have any final words? Like I said, be true to your voice. Do what makes you happy. I believe that filmmaking should be fun, and it should be something that comes out of your heart. I don't think it should be something that, you do to look cool, or you do because you think it's a stylish thing to do. I know that sounds weird, but I do know a lot of people who think that, and I find that pretty strange myself. If that's not how you think, that's okay, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And if you want to make stuff that's non-commercial, do it. If you want to make stuff that's weird, do it. Don't let people tell you how to make your art. Filmmaking will never really be true art until the materials you need to make it are as cheap as a paper and pencil, but we're getting there. Things are getting smaller and cheaper, so it's becoming possible. So now is a better time than any to follow your dreams and make the kind of film you've always wanted to make, because I know you can do it.